Hello and welcome to the Bearded Tits podcast. I'm your host Jack Perks, and this week I've got Fiona McKenna on of the British Dragonfly Society, and we're going to be talking all about deer. No, we're not. We're going to be talking about dragonflies, of course, so I can't wait to do that. But first, here's the news. Now, there's been a boom in fishing during lockdown as rod licence sales soar more than 230% in 2 months, the Environment Agency says. That's 200,000 more people are angling compared to last year. Now, they believe the rise is due to existing anglers embracing the opportunity to start fishing again, together with those taking up the sport for the first time, or returning to the sport after a long absence, prompted by the pursuit of new hobbies during lockdown. Fishing licence income is vital to the work of the Environment Agency to maintain, improve and develop fisheries. Revenue generated from fishing licence sales is reinvested to benefit angling, with work including tackling illegal fishing, protecting habitats for fish and improving facilities for anglers. So all that extra money goes back into helping fish refuges, improving spawning habitat. So it's a big boost for our rivers. So something good to come out of lockdown for a change. But on to my guest this week. So Fiona McKenna, as I said, I've known her for a while now, for a few years. We first worked together at the Lincolnshire Rivers Trust, and I say more recently, she's been there a while now, but at the British Dragonfly Society, and she's going to tell me a little bit more about Britain's dragonflies. Well, thanks for joining me, Fiona.
Oh no, thank you for inviting me.
Are you still in Lincoln?
Yes, yeah, in Lincoln City.
Okay, because we met via the Lincolnshire Rivers Trust, didn't we? Which was a few years ago now, but that must have been a great job to do.
Yeah, it was fantastic. It was one of my first proper paid jobs in conservation, sort of paid full-time, extended contract role. And I was their very first officer as well. So it was a real honour to be their first member of staff and get everything off the ground for them.
Yeah, you did quite heavily involved with them, really, weren't you?
Yeah, it was a good few years I was there, as they sort of started off their main project really, as they didn't have a member of staff before I was on board. So they'd done a few things, but obviously were limited without having a full-time member of staff. And we did the catchment-based approach partnership. We led on that for the Witham catchment in Lincolnshire, which actually takes up most of Lincolnshire. As you found out when we were doing the film.
Yeah, I did rocked up some miles on my car, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a pretty vast area to cover, but yeah, really interesting projects as well, and species that I got to work with.
And you now, of course, you work for a different NGO now, don't you?
Yeah, so that was a couple of jobs ago. So I worked for Keep Britain Tidy in between, and now I've gone over to British Dragonfly Society. So I feel like I've come back to species conservation a bit more, which is my true passion. Hate litter.
Yeah, it's not the most exciting thing to talk about, I guess, is it? But important nonetheless.
No.
So I guess, why should people care about dragonflies and damselflies then?
Because they're super cool. They're just amazing. I just think if people don't care about them, it's purely because they don't know about them. That's the conclusion I've come to, because once you know how amazing they are, you can't not care about them unless, you just switched off from the natural world altogether. Children get it instantly. They just understand how amazing they are. You take a child pond dipping and they just get it kind of instantaneously. They gaze into that pond, you show them what's beneath that surface, you get a net in there and you get a little dragonfly larvae out that looks like an alien, and it shoots that jaw out to grab its prey, and it just captures their imagination. They get it. They just understand how amazing these little insects are. And even adults, when I talk to them at events, we've done events like in the middle of London with the Ministry of Justice, and you chat to people on their lunch break and some of them are kind of like, oh no, that's disgusting, I don't want to see that, it's a horrible insect, because they've probably been conditioned to think like that about insects, sadly. But then you tell them a little bit about them, and you tell them that they're an aquatic insect, and instantly they didn't know that. It's interesting, they want to know more. And then you tell them that insect you see flying around in the summer, that's the very last stage of that insect's life cycle, and it only lives like that for a matter of weeks, a couple of months at the most. And they're really an aquatic insect for the majority of their life, and they can tell us so much about the health of the environment. They can eat mosquitoes and midges and things that people don't tend to like, that bite us and carry diseases. So they're really functional for us as humans as well. And then my favourite fact, that they've been around for over 350 million years. So before the dinosaurs were even here. So if people don't find that fascinating, then I don't know what more they want from an invertebrate, really. They've got it all.
I was going to ask you what your favourite fact is, so you've beat me to the punchline on that one. But well, I think this is right, but my favourite fact is that they were the inspiration for the Alien in the Alien films. Yes. I think that's right, isn't it? With because Ridley Scott's Alien has like the second jaw that shoots out, and H.G. Geiger, I think he was the one who came up with the design, got that from dragonfly larvae, because they've got the little. Is it a mandible? I don't know what the correct term is. What's the bit that shoots out? Is that a mandible or?
It's actually part of like their jaw.
Is it? Okay.
It's like having an arm underneath your chin, really. That's the only way I can describe it. So it's it would be like if you had an arm that sat under your chin, and then it can extend out, and it's got this little toothed mask thing on it as well. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, awesome, definitely.
Sorry, no, I was going to say it's called a labial mask as its correct term, because it kind of sits like a mask almost.
Okay. Now, what amazes me is how many adults are frightened of them. Which is, I mean, I guess they're a big buzzing thing. Which, if you don't know, that might scare you a little bit. But like, they don't sting. A common misconception is that dragonflies sting. Obviously, they don't have a stinger, and they don't really. They'd never bite. I mean, I suppose they could bite you, but they're not going to come at you. They technically
bite. Yeah, you'd have to really annoy them and like stick your finger in their mouth, I think, to get them to bite you. Yeah. I've never heard of a dragonfly going up to somebody and biting them. So, I mean, they eat insects. They're an invertebrate predator, and they'll eat things on the wing. So it's they're very unlikely to mistake a massive human for a little invertebrate flying around.
They have very, very bad eyesight to do that.
Yeah, and they've got super eyesight, as we know. So it's like they're not going to make a mistake like that, are they? They're just fantastically adapted for what they do. And as I say, I think if you grabbed one and really annoyed it might try and bite you in self-defense. But I just can't imagine why else they would ever bite somebody. But we think that some of those legends of them being a stinger actually come from North America. They know them as horse stingers. And I think they might even have called them that here many years ago, because they see them buzzing around horses in fields, and then the horse would flap its tail as if it was being annoyed, and they maybe thought they were stinging them. But in reality, the horse was probably being bitten by flies or mosquitoes or midges, and the dragonfly was just going around and hoovering up those insects. So they got into it. So I think that's where the name horse stinger came from.
Okay, that makes sense. And yeah, I'd much rather have a dragonfly near me than a horsefly, because they are just crazy.
Exactly.
So for many people who don't know how to tell them apart, how do you tell a dragonfly from a damselfly? I know there's loads of species and it's not a set in stone rule, but if people want to generally know how to tell the difference, how do they do that?
There's two really simple ways. So if you look at dragonflies and damselflies when they're at rest, so if they come and perch on something, the dragonfly will sit like an aeroplane, so have its wings straight out by its side, and it can't actually fold them back. It would break them if it tried to do that. Whereas the damselfly sits with them sort of folded down by its side. So that's a really nice, easy way. So I think of dragonflies, aeroplanes, damselflies. A little boy at an event said they look like a colourful pencil when they're sitting down. So I always remember it that way. They're like a little slim pencil with them by their side. But also the eyes are another key thing. So dragonflies have these sort of massive wraparound eyes that look like they meet right in the middle. And that's true for nearly all of them. There's only a few exceptions. And then the damselflies are almost like little hammerhead sharks. They have them a little bit out on stalks on the edge of their head. So that's another way of remembering the difference. And then generally, size is a bit different. So dragonflies tend to be a bit bigger and bulkier, and damselflies are a bit daintier, and they kind of float along like little floating matchsticks, whereas dragonflies fly with a bit more purpose. So there's a few little ways of remembering them there, but I say the wings are quite a good one to remember.
I'd never thought about that with the damselfly's head like a little hammerhead shark, but now when you say that, that makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking of all the damselflies I've seen, and they're nearly all like that. So that's a way of pointing it out. And I know
see some lovely photos as well of them sort of head on with like a blade of grass or something, and you see their eyes either side.
Yes.
So with the dragonfly, you would just sort of get the edges, but with the little hammerhead damselfly, you can see both eye quite clearly either side.
Because I've been caught out in the past with, I think it might be willow and emerald damselflies. They have their wings open slightly, don't they?
Yeah, so there's always one, isn't there? That has to be difficult. And there's the common emeralds, and there's also the willow emeralds, and they do sit with them at a 45-degree angle, so they're a little bit in between, but they've still got the eyes out on stalks, and they're just a lot daintier, so you can tell they're a damselfly by those other points. But yeah, there's always one that has to try and be difficult and get one out.
Can't just be conformative.
Spread wings in America because of the way they hold their wings like that, which I think is quite nice, but some people don't like the terminology they use.
And how many species do we have in the UK? I should say. I mean, in the world, I imagine there's hundreds, but in the UK,
there's getting on for 6,000 in the world,
wow.
which is huge when you think compared to beetles and things like that. You know, there's absolutely thousands of them. So they are quite a manageable group, but we've got, I think it's around 48 now, including some of the migrant species. It keeps fluctuating a little bit as we keep getting different species kind of extending their range due to climate change. And like willow emerald that you mentioned earlier, they're quite a recent colonist. They came across sort of under their own steam in, I think it was 2007, so it wasn't that long ago. And they were just found in one place, I think it was Felixstowe in Suffolk. And we think we can trace it for when they came across, because there was a like high winds and storms, and they brought across I think it's the midges or the gnats that brought across the blue tongue disease in that year. And we think the willow emeralds came across in that same weather event. So we can be almost certain about when they came and where they came. And then we've got a few volunteers who've been tracking them ever since then. So we've got Willow Emerald Watch on our website. You can look at the maps from around 2007 onwards and see how they've spread out across the country. And they are up in Lincolnshire and Yorkshire now, so they've spread quite far north. And then I think somewhere like Buckinghamshire might be the furthest west, or they might have gone a bit further than that now, actually. So yeah, they really like it here, really doing well. So they're a winner.
And with these species, so you wouldn't class these as non-native. They're just a natural migrant. It's the sort of way you'd look at it, is it?
Yeah, natural colonists. So they've come across sort of under their own steam with a little bit of help from a bad weather incident. So just like butterflies can migrate and sort of use the winds to carry them a bit further, they've just done that, and either accidentally ended up somewhere that they like, and then they've just colonized it, and yeah, they seem to be loving it here.
Are there any other species that, I guess, with the onset of global warming, that you would expect to be in the UK in, say, the next 10, 15 years? So, for example, I went to Hungary a couple of years ago, predominantly for butterflies, but we saw, is it scarlet darter? Is that what they're called? And they're a really vivid dragonflies. Like, wow, like you can't miss it. I mean, I don't know if anything like that would turn up, but like, is there something like, I wouldn't be surprised if these colonise the UK sooner rather than later?
I mean, we've had a few, like southern migrant hawkers are turning up more readily, and I don't think there's been records of I mean, don't quote me on it, as the migrant project isn't my thing, but I don't think they've been recorded as breeding here yet. But yeah, there's certainly more variety of things coming over. So I wouldn't be surprised if more did find it suitable here. But obviously there's the kind of the flip side of that is that some of our more northerly species are going to be really struggling if we do get this influx of new species coming in. Then anything that's kind of a specialist to this country, or particularly Scotland and places like that, they don't have anywhere further north to go. There's quite a big expanse of water between them and the next bit of land. So they just would, die out eventually. So yeah, it's so important to keep an eye on where things are, numbers of things, and just recording really. And that data is so vital to help us know what is going on with them. And they are used as a bit of an indicator as to what's happening in regards to things like climate change as well.
Because there's a few in Scotland, isn't there? Of sort of I don't know if they're endemic, but like you only really find them in the Highlands. Is it black dart, black-faced dart, or something like that?
There's the Northern Emerald is one that you only get in Scotland. There's white-faced darts, but they're not only in Scotland; they are in pockets of England and Wales as well. But yeah, I mean, we have got Scotland officers who work on things like the Northern Damselfly project as well. That's another one that's only in Scotland or sort of very near to the borders as well. So yeah, there's a couple of specialist species. It'd probably be worth you chatting with them as a follow-up actually about those projects if anyone wants to find out more about them. But yeah, if they go, then it's like they're not found anywhere else. They couldn't live further south because they're only adapted to living, in the most northerly climes of our country. So yeah, they wouldn't be doing very well at all if they got pushed out by another species.
No, I think I have seen northern damsels actually, because I went to the Cairngorms a few years ago and I was there in around July, August, and I thought I'm going to specifically go and try and find one of these. Why? Because I normally go in the winter, but I was there in the summer for this time. But I'm going, and I found one, and they're not the most remarkable. It's a very unfair thing to say. They're not the most remarkable looking dragonfly, but about where they live and how they live was interesting, and that's why I thought, okay, I'll go see one. So I did find some, but yeah, they are pretty interesting. And
that's the thing with the rare ones, isn't it? Is that they're not always the most colourful or the showy or kind of the ones that come and see people regularly. They can be a bit more shy and they get overlooked or under recorded as well. So they're almost their own worst enemy in some way.
Yeah, and yeah, like you say, it's weird how that happens with so many, things that say like the nightingale, kind of a little brown jobby of a bird, but now it's pretty rare. Or like some of the fish that I've worked with, like the Vendace is just a little silvery looking, nothing spectacular, but it's incredibly rare. So yeah, it seems to be a common trait. I never really noticed that before, but yeah, that is true.
Yeah, commonly overlooked probably, as well as being rare.
Yeah, definitely. I think I saw on your Twitter that you've done a pond recently. Is that right?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I did a lockdown pond. I was one of the lockdown project people.
Yeah, no, I think I suspect the number of ponds will have increased dramatically from March to like early May. So
I hope so.
Definitely. If someone has a garden pond and they want to encourage dragonflies and damselflies, what can they do to specifically kind of help them live in their ponds or encourage them to their ponds?
So something I didn't do that I'll hold my hands up to is that you should really only use rainwater. As we've heard from so many of the experts that it's the best thing for wildlife. There are a lot of chemicals in tap water, obviously, to make it safe for us as humans to drink and use. And they can take a long time to dissipate, even if you sort of leave them to evaporate. I've read that chlorine and things like that can take, I don't know, maybe months and even a year to evaporate off properly. And I have noticed my pond, as I did the no-no, I filled it with tap water. It had been very dry. So I'm in the east of England and we are technically a drought zone and we don't get a lot of rainfall throughout the year. And it had been very, very dry. It was one of the driest springs on record, I think we'd had, and one of the hottest Mays, I think. And my water butt was empty, and it was only a very small one anyway. And I dug quite a big pond. So I was in a bit of a dilemma as I wanted to get that liner in, and I didn't want birds or cats or anything coming in and ripping it. So I just wanted to get some water in it to protect it. So I just hose pipe in and did it. Probably should have waited and put more water butts in or planned it better. But the habitat's there. Wildlife are coming to use it. Birds are drinking from it. I put lots of oxygenating plants in. So I have done some things right. So I've introduced some native plants in there. I've got hornwort, which is a really good oxygenator. And things like dragonfly larvae, any fly larvae, any invertebrates will be able to hide in that. Frogs and things like that will be able to hide in it as well. And it's a really good oxygenator, so great for the water quality, hopefully. And it will hopefully fix some of those excess nutrients I've got in there. And then I've got a few more things on order, like frog bit, which is a little floating plant, which I think is another native one. And it has little flowers, so it's meant to look like a little mini water lily. So that'll be good for creating a bit of shade as well, as you don't just want open water, you want a nice variety of different habitats within your pond. And something I did take a bit of time over was measuring my pond out and making sure I had the right levels in there, as it's all about creating different niches for all the different species that you want to attract. So I've gone for a nice bit of deep water in the middle. That's about 70 centimetres deep. So I'm hoping that will be deep enough for amphibians to go to the bottom and hibernate over winter and not be too affected by temperature changes, and should stop it freezing over totally as well. And then I've got some nice kind of shallower shelves, so it comes sort of up from the deep bit. And then there's a nice little beach at the edge and then a deeper bit at the other end. So I've tried to go for lots of variety of depths and little shelves to put my plants on as well. So I would just say, whatever size space you've got, work with what you've got, and work with the shaped area you've got and what works for your garden. But just get that variety in there, get a nice deeper bit in the middle. So if you're going for wildlife pond, your top things you're going to attract are probably going to be amphibians and then invertebrates, and then birds and mammals will hopefully use it to drink from and bathe in too. So just think about all those different uses, I would say, as obviously that's not specifically dragonfly related, but it will benefit dragonflies, but why not make it benefit as many species as possible while you're there? And a top tip for plants as well, try and get ones that not only oxygenate and do lots of good things under the water, but get lots of nice marginals and emergents that have also got flowers, so they're good for pollinators as well. So you kind of you're getting more bang for your buck, to use an overused phrase. But hopefully the bees will be happy as well then, so you're attracting more wildlife in. And as I said before, dragonflies are top predators of other insects. So if you're attracting other wildlife into your garden, butterflies, bees, flies, anything like that, that's providing food for the dragonflies as well. So you're covering all bases really. And then don't forget to plant up around the pond as well. So when amphibians and things like that are coming out of the pond, they've got a nice little bit of cover. And then also dragonflies and damselflies will love to shelter in it as well. So that hopefully covers most bases. People like Frog Life have got fantastic information on building wildlife ponds with amphibians in mind. So I would say read as many resources out as you can, as there's so much free information on the internet. And Wildlife Garden Project, I know you've done a few videos with them.
Yeah.
They've got some fantastic resources as well. So yeah, just read as much as you can, and design it with as many species in mind as possible.
I know with my pond, I mean, when in my new house, I've got a 4 meter by 4 meter liner, so I'm going to try and do a much bigger pond than what I've got at the minute. But I've read up that dragonflies prefer slightly bigger ponds. I think they don't like tiny ponds. I guess the prey.
They won't.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think they will use a bit bigger pond. I think they just need a bit of a bigger space. But I'm not sure exactly why. I haven't read exactly why they won't use a smaller one. It could just be the surface area, or the oxygen levels are lower in smaller ponds if they're shallower. Something as simple as that, or there's not enough prey, like you say, for the lot.
I guess if you think about it, I mean, I don't know how many eggs dragonflies have, but I'm guessing it's a hell of a lot. So if you've got hundreds of dragonfly larvae, then they're going to need a lot of prey, aren't they? So I guess a bigger pond.
They're quite voracious, aren't they? Dragonflies.
They are, yeah. If you go and you leave it in the tray with other stuff too long, then you're just going to have one very fat dragonfly larvae, aren't you? Eventually. Yeah. And the other plant I find really good for dragonflies is yellow flag iris, because, like you say, they create nectar, but also when the dragonflies emerge, the nymph climbs up that. I mean, they'll climb up anything, but that's a particularly good plant because they'll hang on and then emerge out of it. So that's another.
Yeah, something Rory Mackenzie Dodds, who is our dragonfly champion. I first got really interested in dragonflies as an adult by going to one of his courses when I worked for the RSPB in Scotland. And I would say it's his fault that I got interested in dragonflies. I blame it on him. he was just singing the praises of soggy logs, like just put wood into ponds. Because species like southern hawker absolutely love to lay their eggs and things like that. And then things like to perch on them as well. So yeah, they're really good. And make sure you put a dragonfly perch in. That's a really good top tip. If you can put a little log or just stick a branch into the ground near the pond so it just juts out over it, a bit like a kingfisher perch that you see people putting in at nature reserves, but in miniature. That's fantastic for dragonflies, and they might just come and bask in the sun over your pond or use it to hunt from. So that's a nice little top tip that's, it's not expensive. Just grab a stick from somewhere and pop it in, and they'll be really happy.
No, I tend to get logs from my river because obviously you want to be careful introducing fresh wood because that can have lots of tannins and things like that might not be great.
Yeah.
But if you get a log out of your river that's already washed through, I've got a couple of those jutting out of my pond. And I guess as well, they heat up quickly. So if, dragonflies like to bask, so going on that, they'll warm up. I've just thought of a follow-up question. So I know I said that was the last one, but that's obviously a lie now. But what species of dragonflies tend to colonise ponds first? And I suppose it probably depends where you live in the country, but are there any species that are known to kind of colonise garden ponds quickly? I know damselflies, I've got to remember now, is it large red or small red? They're quite quick, aren't they?
Yeah, large red are very widespread across the whole country, and they're one of the very first to emerge each spring usually. The first records we get are nearly always for large red, unless it's a strange spring and others are emerging first. So they will come to garden ponds, but not always. I've heard of broad-bodied chasers being quite reliable. Obviously, they're not across the whole country, not in Scotland so much. But they do like ponds, and the Butterfly brothers, Joel Ashton, he was telling us in a talk he did at one of our events that nearly always broad-bodied chasers would come and investigate a pond they put into their clients' gardens, like the first one within kind of an hour or so of them completing it.
Wow.
So broad-bodied chasers are one of the first, but emperors are known to be colonist species, and they will check out new ponds to come and lay their eggs in. My friend who lives in York, who put not a huge pond in, only about sort of 1.5 meters long, she put that pond in last winter, and by the summer she had an emperor laying eggs in there, and sent me a photo saying, "There's this big dragonfly. What's this one? I think it's laid eggs or something." And I was like, "You've got an emperor? That's amazing!" And so they definitely do come and check out new ponds. So I'd say broad-bodied chaser and emperor, sort of depending where you are in the country, they're the ones to look out for that will probably come in first.
Well, that's great. I can't wait to dig my new pond now, and wait for the first dragonflies to come. I'm expecting, at least half the species in the UK would be nice. A good variety buzzing around there.
I'm still waiting for them to find mine.
So,
I need to put a sign out.
they obviously don't appreciate that you're working for them.
I know. I think they're boycotting it on purpose.
It's playing hard to get. Well,
yeah.
Look, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Fiona.
Oh, you too. Thank you for having me on.
That was Fiona McKenna of the British Dragonfly Society. I have to admit, when you really stare at a dragonfly, there's something almost mechanical about them, and they are just incredible creatures. I mean, normally they're zipping around, so you don't get a good look. But if you do get a chance to really study a dragonfly, maybe look at a picture of them, they are just an incredible looking creature. Now this brings me on to Nature Reserve of the Week, and seeing as Fiona is a proud yellow belly, I thought I'd better do a Lincolnshire Nature Reserve, and one of the best known ones is Wisby Nature Park. It's a network of lakes surrounded by grassland, marsh, scrub and willow carr. Elements of the original quarry landscape remain, with fragments of heathland, old hedgerows and a small oak woodland. So it's a myriad of habitats there for various creatures. In the spring and summer, flocks of tits and finches are joined by warblers. The lakes attract feeding sand martins and swallows, and terns nest on the islands. Chiffchaffs, along with reed and sedge warblers, can be heard. And Wisby Nature Park has also become synonymous with nightingales, a nationally rare species. It's also a great place to see and hear bitterns, and in the autumn it brings the first sight of winter birds, such as goldcrest, redpolls and grey wagtails. In the winter, the water levels are at their highest, and wildfowl are numerous. The cold weather also brings with it huge murmurations of starlings in their thousands, swarming and twisting across the misty lakes. It's a phenomenal sight if you ever get the chance. There are various hides dotted around the nature reserve, and there's also one with some bird feeders right next to the car park, which could be pretty good for photography. It has a large visitor centre with exhibitions of fully stocked cafe, toilets and gifts, and it also has an indoor and an outdoor play area for children, along with a large car park. So it's a phenomenal place. Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust, I don't think they own it outright, but they have input on the centre. But it's an amazing place if you ever get a chance to visit if you're in Lincoln. Well worth a visit. This has been the Bearded Tit Podcast. I've been your host, Jack Perks, and I will catch you in the next one. Cheers.